Good evening, hello. You are watching The Extra Point. We come to you live every Friday night, 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, talking AFC South and NFC South. I am your host, Sharona. I am joined by some of my favorite writers in the division, Greg BARBER, Leo Howell, and Brad Hill. And we're going to bring you guys a little bit of a rewind of the division from Week 1 and a preview of the division in Week 2, and I just have to say, for Brad, my Jaguars, my Jaguars buddy, that the Tennessee Titans sit atop the AFC South right now, having won their first game in Kansas City on the road against a very tough Kansas City team.
Are they really that good, or were they kind of fluky last year? That's the question.
Yeah, it is the question. We're going to talk about that. I want to bring you guys in first and let you introduce yourself to our audience. Brad, we'll start with you since I took just a little bit of a dig at you.
All right, my name is Brad Hill. I'm not currently writing anywhere right now, but I've written for Big Cat Country on SB Nation and also Bleacher Report, and I used to run my own blog called JaguarsBlog.com. Pretty much just Twitter right now, Jaguars blog.
He's a lonely Jag out there on the, do they call it the worst coast? Is that what they call it out there in California?
It's like 100 degrees today, so right now.
I'm just giving you a hard time. I'm just giving you a hard time. We are the AFC South gurus tonight, and I've got Greg BARBER, who covers the New Orleans Saints for Football.com. Greg, tell everybody about you.
Oh, basically, Greg BARBER, of course, writer for Football.com, the New Orleans Saints writer. Been a lifelong fan. I live in Tampa, Florida myself, so, and like I said, it's pouring over here, so we're not getting that 100-degree weather right now. But anyway, feel free to connect with me or follow me on Twitter, Intensity. Be glad to have you.
All right, Leo, last but certainly not least, Leo Howell.
Thanks, Sharona. I'm Leo Howell. I write for BucksNation.com and also for NumberFire.com and now RotoGrinders.com, which are more fantasy football. We can definitely talk about that as well. I have some thoughts on the Chiefs based on that too. But anyway,
good. We can definitely want to hear your thoughts on that. Leo's being a little bit shy with us tonight. He is going to hereafter be referred to as Pictureless Leo. Just for the duration of the show, though.
I'm either shy or I just have no idea how to work a webcam. It's one of the two. So
it's all good. It's all good. All right. Well, let's go ahead and dive into it because there's a lot to talk about. And we will start with the AFC South, the Titans and Chiefs game. It's interesting because I had initially predicted that the Titans would lose that game. But that was early on in the preseason, and as time went by, injuries, Dwayne Bowe serving the one-game suspension, they were missing DeAnthony Thomas, and so I changed my prediction to a win. But I didn't expect the Titans to. I thought it would be a much closer game, and I do think that it probably could have ended up being a closer game if Derek Johnson and DeVito do not get injured. I know Leo wants to weigh in on that. Leo, what are your thoughts?
I think that what we're seeing is the reality of the Chiefs team that we saw in the second half of last year, even losing a little more talent than what they had at this time last year. Through the first 7 games of last season, I think they had like 35 sacks and like 20 interceptions. And since then, they've had like half of each in more games. They've just really fallen off. And it's a full credit to the Titans, like having Jake Locker back and getting the running game going with multiple backs definitely, served them well. But, yeah, that Chiefs team without the talent of DeVito and Johnson in the second half, like they could still get after the passer from what I saw. But you definitely saw that the running game, there were a couple instances in the fourth quarter where the Titans were just able to run for 10, 15 yards, just run out the clock, and that's not something you could do against the Chiefs last year. So I saw Dontari Poe get pushed around a little bit. That's not like him. So I think it's full credit to the Titans, but I think it also is. It's one of those happy mediums. Like the Titans aren't as good as you might think after that, but I don't think that the Chiefs are as good as a lot of people thought coming into the season either.
I think that you have to factor in all the things that you mentioned and the things that I mentioned. Their secondary was definitely going to be weak. I just realized I've got a little small window. I'm not sure what's going on there, but you guys can see me, so that's all right. The Chiefs secondary was going to be it was going to be weaker this year, and then when Donnie Avery is your number one wideout, you know that you're going to have problems on offense.
Yeah, so particularly when you have to throw.
Just my opinion. Brad, what were your thoughts on that win?
Well, I didn't get a chance to watch that game. I do think that going into this season, it seemed like everybody thought the AFC South was basically a one-team division, and it was Colts way up here, and everybody else kind of caught up down here. And I actually have a bet, in fact, a charity bet. The loser has to donate $5 to somewhere, that the Colts won't win more than 10 games. And I think mainly my main point is that I think that division is way more condensed than people think it is. I don't think the division is going to be a whole lot higher than any of the other teams. They all look like they're pretty, average to above average maybe rosters. Tennessee's roster is a lot better than it did last year. Jacksonville is a lot better than last year.
There's one difference between the Colts and the rest of that division. Andrew Luck. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. You got a high caliber quarterback who's leading that really an average team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In that division, and that's kind of putting them over the top. Other than that, I mean, the Jaguars are much improved. I saw them in preseason. Yeah. I liked what I saw. I'm like, this team's going to be a beast in a year or two. We're going to be worried about them.
I'm going to leave the Jaguars to last in our discussion because I do think we'll real quickly touch on the Colts and the Texans. I agree with you, Greg. I see the Colts from last year have I don't think that they got better. I think they've gotten just a tad bit worse. And I think the other teams have come up a little bit, and so there's more parity in the division. The gap between the top and the bottom has narrowed from last year. In large part, it's going to depend, in my opinion, on quarterback play, because the teams chasing the Colts are going to need steady, good, dependable quarterback play in order to challenge.
True, and I mean, if you really think about it, the Colts losing Robert Mathis is huge to me. That's huge. That's a lot of sacks that's sitting at home right now, healing. I'm one of those who think that. The Colts are a couple of injuries away of falling right into the. They could be the Texans. They could be the Texans from last year. Yeah, they very easily. If Andrew Luck is gone, that team is exposed totally. I think in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Really, they're a injury on anywhere on defense from just having no talent at all. Like if Vontae Davis gets hurt, they've just got nothing on that defense. So Andrew Luck can be as good as he wants, but if there's no run game and there's no defense, he literally has to do it all. And that's something that nobody can do, frankly, because you got to have something to keep defenses and offenses off balance.
You're already, and I'm going to go ahead and just admit it right now. I was wrong about Trent Richardson. I spent a lot of time defending him, and I do think the criticism got a little bit out of control last year, but he's not looking any better at all this year. The offensive line, though, is a disaster. So I definitely think, Brad, did you get a chance to see any of the Colts-Broncos game? Brad, I think we've lost your audio.
I think he lost his video, too, because his video hasn't moved.
Okay. Brad, I'm going to have to ask you to go ahead and come back in. Maybe that'll cure your audio issues. In the meantime, I know Leo had a chance to take a look at the Colts and the Broncos. What did you take away from that game?
From a Colts perspective, I think we're seeing the things that we're talking about here, in that there's just not a lot of talent outside of Andrew Luck and those receivers. And there's a lot of talent there. There's T.Y. Hilton, Reggie Wayne, Dwayne Allen, Kobe Fleener. Like, there's some good players there, but they can't get a run game going, so that offense was just so stagnant until it got to the point where they had to pass, and Luck just kind of did that thing he does where he kind of improves as the game goes on. So, but otherwise, yeah, I mean, I feel like we saw kind of what this team is going to be this year, and they're going to have to win games like 45-41 instead of trying to get 27 points and try to win. I'm not sure the Colts can do that very often this year.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something to watch and see how they manage to handle all of that. Brad, did you get a chance to see any of that game?
I watched a little bit of it. Can you guys hear me now, by the way?
Yes.
So I saw some of it. Richardson looks exactly the same as he did last year. Super unimpressive. He and Sean Green can battle up for the fastest. But they're essentially just a passing game, and I mean, like Leo said, Monte Davis, that's basically it. They pretty much have no pass rush now that Mathis is out. He was not only their best passer, but he also helped make the other guys better because he would take up so much attention. And he would even cause team depth to keep tight ends. So that's a huge loss for them. And I think you're right. I think you're looking at 40. You got to score 40 to win kind of games. They're playing the Eagles this week, I think. And based on the Eagles team that I just watched, I do not think the Colts are winning that game. 0-2 start, and then they've got to come play the Jacksonville home opener the following week. That they actually have a legit chance to start 0-3.
Or 0-4, because I forget who it is they face. But yeah, I completely agree, and I think that the division has been weak and definitely has been open for another team to step in and take it. Could possibly be the year the Titans right now undefeated. They are going to face the Dallas Cowboys, their home opener this Sunday. But before we talk about previews, let's talk about that Jacksonville Philadelphia game. I was pulling so hard, Brad. I was like, they're gonna do it. They're gonna do it. I've been saying they're gonna do it. Why did the wheels fall off in the second half?
Well, the main issue was that the first half they had this list of scripted plays where Chad Henne they had designed the offense for Henne to run certain plays and look for certain receivers, and it worked great. He actually looked down the field for once, which he never does. For plays, and it opened up the defense. And then in the second half, he went back to a regular 3-yard slant pass, incomplete, out. 3rd and 7. Here's a 2-yard slant or something, and it just doesn't work. And so the defense played well most of the game. The problem was that Henne and the offense were so unable to get anything going that the defense just got tired out. And the Eagles run so many plays anyway that the best way to limit them is to keep the ball for long stretches. And that's what they did in the first half, and they absolutely didn't do that in the second. And that's basically what happened.
Yeah. Greg, did you get a chance to see any of that game?
No, I didn't really get to see it. I kind of kept up with the score a little bit and all, so I didn't get a chance to see the game. But it was a little disappointing to see the Jags were ahead in that game, and they allowed them to end up having them come back. And a part of that, too, is, to me, it's a little bit of having a really young team and not quite having that killer instinct just yet. You know what I mean?
They don't know how to put games away yet.
Exactly right. So they'll have a foot on the neck, but they don't know how to add that pressure and just go and crack it and be done with it. You know what I mean? And they have to learn how to do that. So, I mean, that game could go a long way in teaching them that they need to get that killer instinct and know how to finish that game next time. Because they had them on the
They had two really important injuries in that game also that affected the second half. One being Toby Gerhardt's ankle.
Yes.
Jordan Topman's not a guy that should be getting NFL carries. But the larger loss was that Jonathan Cyprian missed the entire second half after getting a concussion in the first half. And that not only left the secondary down a guy, but pretty much all the backup safeties are free safety. And so it put Winston Guy on the strong safety spot when he's a starting free safety, and Josh Evans had to play free, and he's not as good as Guy, so essentially you're downgrading both positions. And so they found a success over the middle. Jordan Matthews caught a ball for like 7 yards over the middle. Zach Ertz had a pretty good game. There was so much space. The Jeremy Macklin-Baum, Winston Guy, and one of the corners were just looking at each other going, who was picking him up?
Jonathan Cyprian would be a big loss. What is his status? Has he passed the protocol yet?
No, and he will not be playing this week.
I saw Toby Gerhardt did not practice. Is he out too?
He's questionable, I believe, and I expect him to play. I'll be surprised if he doesn't. Shorts is doubtful, but he's still going on the trip. So I don't know if that's just a generous use of the doubtful tag or if he legitimately because doubtful is supposed to mean 25% chance of playing. So it doesn't mean you can't play, but it's most likely he's out again. So I mean they're going to be out. Limited running back, another receiver out, our best safety out for the game. I mean Washington didn't look good last week at all, but it's still not going to be any kind of easy win by any means. I'm just hoping to get out of there with a squeaker win.
Yeah. Leo, is Alan Hearns legit or not?
From what I got to see, and it's tough to tell on such a small sample size, but what he did in that game matched his draft profile pretty much to a T. You go to the NFL.com draft profile, and it says that he's quick, that he runs hard after the catch, but that he's not very physical, and that just as a receiver, he's more of an athlete than he is, like a technical receiver. And on the plays where he had success, he just had acres of space to work. There was no pressure on him at the line. There was no pressure on him for 10 yards, and he's able to use his speed because he is a quick guy. There was one play in particular that I saw where he was targeted that he did get some hands on him at the line, and then the timing was all off, and part of that's on Henne. Henne's just not very good, but part of that was on him as well in terms of not being able to get in and out of his breaks with the guy kind of having his hands on him a little bit. I feel like he's compared to their other options there. Like I love Mike Brown. He went to my school. He's a better wide receiver than Mike Brown in terms of physical tools. But overall, like this isn't a guy that you can expect to score 2 touchdowns every week. But he is a guy who can take advantage of mistakes. And sometimes that's all you need. And especially if you got a guy like Shorts, who's kind of more of an all-around receiver. Just having a secondary threat like that who can take advantage.
Having him back will be huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can the Jaguars beat the Redskins this weekend, Leo?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Redskins are going to be prone to what the Jaguars do well on defense, and that's using that front seven to get pressure. I feel like the Redskins have that kind of Colts and we'll talk about the Bucs later, but that level of offensive line that can be really exposed and a quarterback who doesn't handle pressure well. So and Nick Foles didn't handle pressure well in the first half either, and that's really what gave the Jaguars their lead, and I feel like you can do the same thing to Robert Griffin, and they don't have as good of a defense as the Jaguars.
Greg, can the Jaguars beat the Redskins?
Yes. I mean, right now you're running a situation where everybody basically want to run the quarterback out of town at this point, and the team is disarray. Everybody's saying, they need to learn this new offense and do all this. So I mean, I think that the Jags have they've been together for now second season, so they definitely have a shot. And as Leo said, that offensive line is not protecting Griffin very well at all. So at this point in time, if the Jags get that pressure on the line up front, then I mean that's going to help them right off. But I think unless Griffin just cuts loose and start running, it gets back to scrambling and playing the way he plays. That's where it may give the Jags a tougher time. But if he's got to try to, if he's going to stay in that pocket, they won't. He won't survive. He probably won't survive that game.
I agree, Brad. Can and will the Jaguars beat the Redskins? Real quick, and when are we going to be able to? When can we expect to see young Mr. Bortles make his appearance?
Well, I do think they have a good shot to win. If I was making a pick, I would say that the Jags are more likely to win that game than lose the game. They had success stopping the run last week against a better rushing team, so they're probably going to be forcing Griffin to try to beat him through the air, which is probably not happening at this point. It's really going to come down to can the offense move the ball at all. Because if you get the first half offense from last week, absolutely winning. But if the second half offense from last week shows up all game long, then you're not going to win with 9 points. That's basically what it comes down to. And almost, I would say 99% of the Jaguars fans that I have any communication with are already done with any ready for Bortles. I'm on the same boat. The funny thing was that Gus Bradley apparently this week said that they want Henny to look downfield more, just sling it up and try to make plays downfield. And Alfie Crow at Big Cat Country wrote an article where the title was something like Jaguars are asking Henny to be more like Bortles, which seems like something that doesn't really have much point. Why not just put the kid in and see how he can do? You're not learning anything from Henny, and somebody else on Twitter made a great point about last week. That winning that kind of game is the reason you start a veteran over a rookie. If he can't deliver the win in that kind of game, then why are you bothering with it? So I expect, but it depends on which offense shows up, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, we haven't yet gotten to the Houston Texans, but we did just touch upon that Washington team. I was determined not to use that word, but anyway, the Redskins played the Texans. The Texans won that game pretty handily. Their offense was pretty steady. We got good Ryan Fitzpatrick. They made plays, but they lost Jadeveon Clowney to an injury that's going to keep him out somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks. We'll have to wait and see how that comes down. So my question is to you guys: bigger loss in the division, Jadeveon Clowney or Zach Brown, who was the inside linebacker for the Tennessee Titans? I'll start with you, Brad.
I think it's Clowney by a mile. If you look at the defense that they had last year that led them to those 2 wins and 14 straight losses, they didn't add a whole lot. They added Clowney, they added Lewis Nix, but that he's a rotational defensive tackle. I mean, what else their secondary is still terrible. Without that monster pass rush, they're probably liable to getting blown up defensively again. And that was their main issue last year. And besides the quarterback turning the ball over, was that their defense couldn't stop anybody. So I would say Clowney's a larger loss. Tennessee seems like they have a lot more defensive talent than Houston does at this point, even though Houston has the best player of the two teams, obviously. I actually think Tennessee's got a pretty solid defensive unit, and I think they can survive the loss of one guy better, especially when it's not drastically cutting that pass rush.
All right, Greg?
That's a tough one. I don't know. I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna agree with Brad on this one. That I think that Clowney, and it's kind of close because I understand that Brown means a lot to you guys, but I do think that when you come at a team that came with a 2-14 record, it wasn't like the defense was stellar last year. So it seems like Clowney would be a little more needed in this particular case.
All right, Leo.
I'm going to have to agree here. I will say that part of it's just because of where they play within the schemes, that you've got a guy in Clowney who's kind of the only outside rusher that you could, kind of had hopes for of even getting better as this year went on. Obviously, Watt playing the end spot in the 3-4, it was a different role. Obviously, he's still, fantastic, but Clowney coming with that outside pressure kind of gave them a lot of different things they could do. Whereas a guy like Brown, you've still got Woodyard there, and obviously they're going to have to replace Brown, but you've still got a talent in that middle. Whereas now on the outside at the edge rusher position, I don't know what the Texans have, and that could really sap what they do on defense. Whereas I feel like the Titans can keep doing what they were doing just with a different player in Brown's spot, and so sure it's not as good, but I do feel like Clowney's gonna, Clowney's loss changes what the Texans are able to do on defense, which I do feel could hurt their defense long term.
Real quick. I will real quick make the case for Zach Brown, because initially I was like, look, the Texans defense was still better than the Titans defense last year, and you cannot discount that. They've got J.J. Watt, they've got some G.J. Swearinger, they've got some talent outside of Jadeveon Clowney, who is a fantastic talent, no doubt. For the Titans, if there was a spot that they could least afford to lose in that front lineup, it was probably on the inside at Zach Brown's position. They have Xavier Gooden, a second-year player from Missouri, who has been far and away better than I ever expected him to be in this new defense. A guy that I really liked coming out of Missouri. But they've got rookie Avery Williamson. They don't really have much in the way of guys who can come in and rotate, and that's going to be, I think what you're going to see them do is play a lot more nickel and dime to save that rotation, and so it's going to force them to do, unless they pick somebody up somehow, trade. I don't know. I don't think there's really that much out there on the market. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that it's a pretty big loss, in my opinion, for the Titans. Not that Xavier Gooden's not a good player. He is. He's a very good player. But it is going to force them into to do some things that I think that they would have done anyway, because we saw them play a lot of nickel and dime in training camp. But I think that it's going to by necessity force them into that. So, all right, well, the Titans play the Cowboys this weekend. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this game. They should win this one. I don't think anybody. If you disagree, speak up now or forever hold your peace.
The Titans should win. They should win.
They should win. It's a home game.
But if Dallas can play without mistakes, this game could be a nail biter.
Can Dallas ever?
Leo, the Dallas defense looks much better on paper. I did not think that it really passed the eye test. What do you think?
No, they look terrible on paper. They played better than they played than the paper to me. You know what I mean? Than what they have on paper.
Yeah, I don't think that the Dallas defense is anything to be
scared of,
positive about. Yeah. I mean, there's just not talent there, and I mean they've
losing Justin Durant's going to be big for them.
Yeah, absolutely, because that is one of the players that you could look to and say, here's a guy who can do some things for them, and yeah, I mean, with the drug policy and possibly getting isn't it Skandrick?
He has
back, but even I'm not throwing a party if I'm in Dallas, because you might get Orlando Skandrick back. Like, I feel like that this defense is not that much different than the Chiefs, and we saw what the Titans were able to do, against the Chiefs defense. And I think there's more talent on the Chiefs defense, even with its issues and with Johnson and DeVito out, because there's nobody who can rush a passer like Holly or what's the other guy? Houston on the Dallas defense.
All right, Houston, speaking of Houston, are the Texans going to beat the Raiders? Real quick, we'll start with you, Leo.
Yes, absolutely. Raiders are awful, and I feel like Fitzpatrick's kind of calmed down that offense enough to where, they're just not going to give the game away. All
right, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why. I couldn't see a reason why the Raiders would beat the Texans unless they turn the ball over or just play by epic proportions. Bad by epic proportions.
All right, Brad. I'm sorry, Greg. Go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say no. The Raiders. I can't see the Raiders winning that game.
Greg, Brad.
Have we switched games now? I lost connection. I had to jump back in.
I think he is out.
Did we lose Brad again? Oh well. All right, let's move on real quick to the Eagles and Colts. I think the Eagles are going to win this game. Brad's back with us.
I'm back. Yeah, sorry.
Can't hear you, Brad.
Hello, hello.
We keep losing your mic. You might have to come back in again. All right, Eagles and Colts. We talked a little bit about this. I am all Philly on this game. I actually think they're going to run all over them. What do you think, Greg?
Oh, I have to go with Philadelphia in this game. I mean, as we talked about before with the Colts, I mean, basically you have Andrew Luck and, like I said, a couple of receivers, and that's really about it. But, I mean, Eagles just have a lot more firepower. I still think their defense is suspect, but I don't think it's any. I still think the Eagles pull this game out.
I agree with you. I'm still not buying their defense, but I think that they can score so many points that it's not going to matter that much.
Mm-hmm.
Leo, what do you think?
I'm with you guys on this one. I think that the Eagles' defense might not be good, but it's better than the Colts, and I feel like the Eagles' offense, Nick Foles kind of settled down a little bit and kind of got back into the groove after some mistakes in that first half last week, and I feel like with even less pressure on him this week because the Colts aren't going to be able to get after him, that they'll be able to do what he's going to be able to do. So I'm definitely going.
The Colts really need Bjorn Werner to step up and do something. So far, I think that you have to label. It's way too early to label him a bust, but I think so far you have to label him a bit of a disappointment, don't you?
More than a bit of a disappointment. I haven't heard any. That dude does not jump out that screen like he did at Florida State. Because I liked him in Florida State. I thought he was going to be a pretty good player. He has not panned out very well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's turn to the NFC because I really want to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive line. But before we get there, I don't want to break Leo's heart too early. Before we get there, we've got to start with the game that probably the game that surprised me the most from the weekend. And that would be the New Orleans Saints losing their first game of the year. Greg? Tell us what happened.
Yep. Well, I mean, the Saints and Falcons play up close every year. I mean, every game. I mean, you can put a slip of paper between the two. They really have. No matter what their records are, no matter how many injuries, they play close games. I mean, very seldom do you ever see one blow out the other. So this is no surprise. And of course, here goes that one turnover really made the difference in a sense. But but it was more than that. I mean, the Saints defense did not tackle well. They did not play up to what we thought they would. So that was very disappointing in that sense because they really didn't tackle well, and which gave the Falcons a lot more points. Gave the Falcons a lot of points that they probably wouldn't have gotten if the Saints had played some solid defense. Just tackling alone probably could have stopped some drives and would have definitely stopped a couple of scores. They blew. So, but overall, I mean, I liked how the Saints offense looked. Their offensive line was much better this year than what it was before. I think that having changed at center, which I was so glad that happened, was a big difference. The running game was.
Teron Armstead looks really, really, really good this year.
Oh yeah. Well, pretty much after honestly, when I saw him play, even during the playoffs last season, I never had another worry about Armstead. I think he was going to be. So he was pretty much everything I expected him to be, and better. I mean, you don't hear anything.
I think his technique looks a little bit better, don't you, Greg? I mean, this observation goes back to the preseason.
Yes, he's growing into the position. So he's only going to get better, in my opinion. If he can stay healthy, he's only going to get better. Because if you really think about it, the Falcons didn't even touch Breeze during that whole game. For the most part. They were able to, basically they were able to, I think, basically in the secondary, kind of cover the guys a little better than they did in the first half. But I liked what I saw out of, Brandon Cooks.
Brandon Cooks looked fantastic.
Yeah, he's going to be a little bit of a beast there. So he's going to get better as he goes along. So it's a lot. There's a lot of bright side, and like I said, the biggest thing if the Saints if the defense can just get back to tackling, just play at least well as we're expected to play. They don't have to be necessarily dynamic, but just pretty solid. I think that they'll win a lot of games. They'll beat most teams, and they would have won that game just being solid. That's all they had to be. So I mean, but don't hand it to Atlanta. I will say that I will hand it to Atlanta. They played well, and
They did.
I give them the credit for that game. But the next game is coming in New Orleans. Don't be thinking you winning that one. That's not happening.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to get the latest on Jake Matthews. That's if he's out any significant period of time, that's going to be a big loss for them. I was not buying into the Falcons, and I'm not still, because I think New Orleans lost that game as much as the Falcons. And look, the Falcons are talented. Hey, I have Julio Jones and Roddy White and a bunch of their kicker. They're talented, but I still think that the Saints are the best team in the division, but they sure didn't play up to that title. Brad, did you get a chance to see any of that game?
I basically just caught highlights. I definitely can agree Cooks looks really good, and that is basically a bigger Sproles that can also make plays down the field. That's kind of messed up for the rest of the division. They're going to have to deal with him for the next decade. So I feel bad for them. But at the score, it just reminded me of all those other kind of blowout games, and the kind that I think the Colts are going to be in a bunch this year also, and how those can always turn on. If you're looking at a game where both teams are scoring a lot of points, one turnover can make a huge difference. One penalty, and so though I didn't get to catch it, it sounds like there were some missed tackles that maybe prolonged the drive, and maybe those made the difference. And that kind of stuff always seems like it makes a difference in those shootout kind of games. But they have good defensive talent. I'm a big Cam Jordan fan, and they got Bird this year, I think. That's a good-looking defensive unit, maybe, if they just play a little better. It's easy to say that that's the issue, but it sounds like Greg agreed with that. They just need to play a little better, and that can be one of the top teams in the NFC again.
Missed tackles can be a killer, and a lot of times they can be infectious too, which is not good either. We saw that with.
Yeah, I was going to say, according to Pro Football Focus, they missed like 16 tackles in that game.
Oh wow, that's a lot.
Think about how many drives that could have been stopped. Think about. The Antoine Smith play, I think 3 players missed the guy, and the guy ended up going in for that touchdown.
Yeah, that's a ridiculous number of missed tackles.
So, I'm just saying, just tighten up in those little areas there. They don't have to be necessarily, like I said, they don't have to be dynamic. They don't have to, score big points, but just play solid and just, tackle well, play the fundamentals. They're easily a 12, 13-win team with that offense if that defense plays solid. That's, it's easy.
Leo, did you get a chance to see very much of that game and have an opportunity to take anything away from it, Brandon Cooks or the missed tackles?
Yeah, I watched the whole game because the Bucs were on late, so that's what was on here in Florida,
yeah.
and so I was watching that, and I also did the tape breakdown of Cooks for Roto Grinders. And my observation on Cooks was you heard the Darren Sproles comparison coming into the season, and that's what a lot of people were talking about. Then you watch him, and on his first NFL play, he's running 20 yards downfield right at the safety and cutting off into open space and making a catch. And not only making a catch, making a great hands catch and getting popped and holding on to the ball. Like, that's not Darren Sproles. That's legitimate slot receiver. That's like Booker with speed. Yeah. That's Steve Smith. Like, that's not just trick player. Like, this kid is going to be, like, on that Steve Smith, kind of Deshaun Jackson little receiver who can do really big things. Just because it's the technique, it's the way he does everything is just so good, and I was just really impressed with him and the way that they used him. Like, they moved him around, and it's not just because if you have Drew Brees, you don't need to do anything special with your offense because he's just going to make things happen. But once you start adding in wrinkles because you've got this kid who can do special things, like it's scary what they're going to be able to do. They have to stop somebody on defense, and like you said, they got the talent, but. On paper, I didn't think there was any way the Saints lost that game, and the offense proved me right, but the defense proved me wrong, and that's just what was confusing to me. But the offense is definitely special, and it's something to watch for all season.
All right, Leo. Moment of truth. I'm sorry, Greg. Go ahead.
I was going to say the thing about Cooks that a lot of people don't realize. I look at him in the sense of, like you said, almost like a Wes Welker to a point as a slot receiver or whatever. And he's probably a lot better because he's a little faster and all. But I'm saying the fact because he caught 128 passes just his last year in college. When you think about that, he could be a workhorse. You could use him as a workhorse wide receiver if you need to.
All right. Leo, moment of truth. I'm not sure how the score ended up being as close as what it was. I thought the Bucks played a lot worse than I ever expected them to in their first game. Tell us your thoughts on that loss, and then we'll talk about the defensive line.
Sure. I feel like the final score reflected the fact that both teams kind of had some lapses that kind of led to the score where it was. The Panthers weren't gonna score all that much in that game without the Bucks giving them turnovers, which is what you saw. On the other hand, the Bucks weren't gonna score without kind of getting an opportunity to catch the Panthers kind of sleeping a little bit. And once it got to 17-0, they were able to kind of settle into the game a little bit and made it closer than it should have been based on the rest of the game before. I feel like it was both teams playing poorly, just at different times that kind of matched up to where it was. I mean, Josh McCown, if you take away the 2 interceptions, it wasn't all that bad of a game. But then again, you can't really say that because that's part of what his body of work was. Mm-hmm. He was just trying to do too much, and that's something he's been doing.
Oh, I agree.
The preseason, it's almost like he's frustrated. Like the first 2 plays of the game where he was throwing, he threw it right to Vincent Jackson's hands, and they fell on the ground. Like I think he's getting too caught up in I'm the veteran leader of this offense. I've got to make things happen. Whereas he just needs to game manage. He needs to do 2013 Alex Smith. He just needs to let things happen, and he's trying to do too much. But once he settled in, things turned around a little bit, and he made some plays that Mike Glennon wouldn't make in his wildest dreams. But so you kind of see the 2 sides of the coin here. You see this guy's a backup for his whole career, and that, he's probably not very good. But you also see why they trust him over Glennon. But I think that the real reason the Buccaneers lost and looked so bad is the defensive line, and I definitely think that that's worth talking about.
Yeah. Before we get there, speaking of trust and trust issues, is it time to have trust issues with Doug Martin?
As a pass protector, absolutely. But as a running back and as a run option, the fault there is on the offensive line. Okay. Doug Martin is not capable of doing anything behind a line that's just not giving him time and space. Like Garrett Gilkey was playing left guard for most of the game, and he just was not showing that he was an NFL left guard. Evan Dietrich-Smith has not been playing well against the run. Anthony Collins has not been playing well against the run, and Patrick Omame is just not an NFL guard either. DeMar Dotson is the only offensive lineman for the Buccaneers who can block for the run, and when your right tackle is the only one who can block for the run, you don't have very many options that you can go with.
It sounds like Logan Mankins is back.
He is. He is. He's going to be back, and he's always played with injuries. He played on a torn ACL for a while. Like, the dude's just a warrior, and run blocking is where he shines. So if Anthony Collins can figure it out, and you can get that left side of the line. Because Dietrich Smith and Anthony Collins should not be bad run blockers. They're just underperforming so far. But as they kind of challenge, because they are adding some more zone blocking elements that weren't there before too. So some of that may be gelling with each other and kind of getting used to Tedford's system as opposed to the old offenses that they came from, because they're all coming from different places and different teams.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. No.
No, I apologize. I was just going to ask, are they trying to use the zone blocking scheme?
They implemented a lot of it during camp, and then the game came along, and they were figuring out that it wasn't working, so they dialed it back. It wasn't as prevalent, but it's definitely something that Tedford's used in the past and that they want to use. I feel like that there's just a lot of inconsistency, especially with Tedford not being with the team due to a medical procedure.
Yeah, I think that was huge.
That I feel like they're just going back to a lot of preseason stuff, and in preseason they didn't show as much of the zone because they didn't have to, like they didn't want to put that on tape. So I feel like we're still kind of seeing this offense not even really fully installed yet. Ideally, it's going to be zone blocking, but for now it's kind of a mix of both because they just don't have any options. They've got to do something that these guys can know how to do. Which without Tedford being around, maybe they're limited.
And the reason I was asking that because I know because the Saints had to use it. They were trying it last year, and you can see sometimes breakdowns in the offensive line. And the one thing, and I kind of read up and learned a little bit about the zone blocking scheme, about the fallacies of it. The biggest issue you have is that if one player is missing a block or missing their assignment, and what's even worse if the running back doesn't make a decision after 3 steps. Once he gets that ball 3 steps, he's got to pick a hole and go through it. He does not. It all falls apart like a house of cards.
Yes.
So you have to. So you can tell if the running back is indecisive, it blows up the play. It looks terrible every time. So sometimes it might not be as much the offensive line as the running back just not being decisive enough and hitting the hole and going with it.
Yeah.
And you can tell the difference. So and so that is frustrating. So you'll see a lot of guys there that. But then the offensive line is a huge question with Tampa Bay, honestly. And I've seen a lot of their, I've seen a lot of their stuff too this year.
You're not going to win many games in the National Football League if you're not good in the trenches, and the Bucs have some problems on the other side too. Michael Johnson, what's his status? And when you factor into the Bucs losing Adrian Claiborne, I believe is his name, is that defensive line a legitimate concern now, Leo?
Yes and no. What we saw in Week 1 was a legitimate concern because you had Michael Johnson not being effective, but we learned after the game that's because he injured his ankle earlier in the game and played through it. This is now an ankle injury that is going to keep him out of Week 2. He's already been ruled out of the Bucs game against the Rams. And Adrian Claiborne, yes, it stinks to lose a guy who's your starting defensive end, but he was not good.
He was not good. I know that.
He actually he broke contain on Derek Anderson and then allowed him to run for like 8 or 9 yards on a play, which you've been preparing with the possibility of Cam Newton being there, containing and not allowing that kind of play to happen. Like if that was Cam Newton, that play would have been a touchdown. Fortunately, it wasn't. It was Derek Anderson, so it was only like 8 yards. But I feel like it is a big concern, but it's also an area where they're actually deep. You've got a guy in Will Golston who's shown a lot of promise.
I was just getting ready to ask you about him. Is he? Yeah. It sounds like he's going to be the guy, and that they have some confidence in him.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like he's going to step in. That once Johnson's back, Johnson's going to be the right end. I feel like Golston is the man to play left end for this team, and I feel like that's a good place for him because that's usually going to be, the guy who's a little more of an anchor. Johnson's going to be the wide guy. Johnson's going to be the rush guy. Golston's going to be that anchor on the other side, and I feel like that's a good role for him. But I'm not going to count out Daquan Bowers either, and I feel like this week this is going to be his chance to
every year, everybody believes in Daquan Bowers, and I like the guy, but
nobody in Tampa likes him anymore. I feel like I'm the only one. Anytime I mention
he's running out of chances. He really is, right?
Oh, he's absolutely. This is his last chance for sure, but. I feel like he's a guy that this is his time because last year he was in Greg Schiano's doghouse and didn't barely get to play, but when he did, he looked good. He's been hurt all preseason as he always is, but this is his chance, and I'm not going to count him out just yet. I feel like he's got something in him, and between him and Golston, I think that they're going to kind of fill in and maybe do more than the two were able to do last week, just because Claiborne was so bad and Johnson was hurt. The hope is that what we saw from Johnson is actually injury related and that he's going to actually be better. Because if he's not good, then the Bucs are in awful financial state for the next couple of years because they're
in trouble. They really are. All right. So are the Bucs going to beat the Rams, Leo?
Yes, absolutely. Because as bad as things are for the Bucs, yes, they're worse for the Rams. Whether it's Sean Hill or Austin Davis, there's just nothing there that worries me. Zach Stacy is a plotter that the Bucs are going to be able to wrap up pretty well. And on defense, you talk about all the pass rushers for the Rams. Not only are they short Long this week, he's not going to be playing, but they didn't get any sacks last week.
I know that was.
Yeah, it's just that baffles my mind knowing all that talent.
Me too. I don't get it either. Yeah.
So it'll be low scoring, but I feel like the Bucs are going to win just kind of by default. That I don't know how the Rams score, and I don't know how they stop McCown because they're not going to be able to put pressure on him, and that's the one thing you have to do. So,
Greg, do you agree?
I on my show, I did pick the Bucks. I said score gonna be like 6-3.
Yep.
Because I had like
Sounds about right.
I got like no confidence. I got like no confidence in either quarterback on both sides. I definitely don't have any confidence in the Tampa's offensive line.
Mm.
This could be a cure. I mean, because in all reality, this could be a cure for the Rams line to get those sacks and get going too, because that offensive line has been so questionable with Tampa. So for me, it was like I just said, the score's gonna be like 6-3, if that. You know what I mean? A couple of field goals, and let's call it a day. Get out of there.
All right, Brad. What do you think? Are the Rams going down?
It's hard to pick a winner in that kind of game, but if I had to, I would actually probably pick St. Louis, mostly talent, because I don't believe in either quarterback either. I'm not a Zach Stacy fan, but I'm also not a Tampa's offensive line or wide receivers fan. And it kind of comes down to which unit out of all the units on the field is the best one, and I still think it's the Rams defense, the Rams pass rush, the Rams front seven. They may not have the best secondary or anything, but you can look at week one and go, oh, the Rams can't rush the passer anymore. It may be the Vikings game planned it out somehow. I didn't happen to catch any of that game, but just on the talent on the field, I've got to say. And that seems like one of those games where you'll go in thinking it's going to be 6-3 and it's going to end up being 28-27.
Yeah, I know, right? It's kind of crazy. I too think I think that the Buccaneers are going to win. I guess we'll see. I remain baffled by why St. Louis went out and drafted all these players that they're not going that don't fit what they're doing. So it's kind of curious to me. We didn't talk about the Panthers in depth, but let's real quick touch upon them. They're going to be playing the Detroit Lions this week. It sounds like Cam Newton's going to be back. Who wins this game? Brad, I'll start with you.
Detroit looked really good, so I've got to go Lions. I watched half that Panthers game, and even if you throw Newton in there, they kind of look just a little disjointed for a lot of that game. I'm not sure Newton's the difference to put it all together. D'Angelo Williams sounds like he's probably not going to play either. So who knows if there's going to be any semblance of a running game. Detroit looked good on both sides of the ball, and Calvin Johnson looks unstoppable, just like usual.
Wow, he did. He looked amazing. Greg?
Yeah.
Detroit. I just don't see. I mean, that game. There's a case to be made that Carolina could win the game, no doubt. Because of their front seven, and because if you get Cam back, that might help them a little bit. But I just think Detroit. I mean, there's too many weapons for their defense.
Rolling.
Stop.
They're rolling.
I mean, they're using. I mean, they're using the Saints actually offense, kind of some of their offensive philosophy. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that team develops with using a lot of weapons. And Stafford, I don't see it. I just don't see that. I don't see Carolina winning that game.
Leo, what do you think?
My opinion.
I think that before we get too caught up on the Lions, I think we need to realize how bad the Giants are probably going to be.
Yes, they're terrible.
I feel like this is going to be a very close game, and I'm actually going to pick the Panthers to win.
All right.
I feel like if Cam Newton is any semblance of what Cam Newton should be, that they're going to win that game. However, there is the possibility that he's just going to be so worried about his two injuries, the ribs and the recovering ankle or foot or whatever it was. Because like he said, he is, in his press conference that everyone's been talking about, that he is worried about those tackles getting interior pressure against him. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be, those are the guys who are going to pop him in the ribs too, and that's going to be something in his mind. But if he's able to play confidently, I feel like that they're going to win, because I don't trust Stafford to do what he did against any old defense. I think that's the key.
Yeah, do we get derpy Matt Stafford, or do we get awesome Matt Stafford? We had awesome Matt Stafford this week. We'll see what we get next week.
I will say this though: if Greg Hardy doesn't play, which with all the things going on this week, they may make a stance on that. that changes everything.
Yeah, it does.
So,
it really
that
does.
that would be a big deal because if Stafford has time, that changes everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I
From
don't
the
think that
sound-
they'll do anything this week. I think if anything, it could possibly be next week. But you're right. There were some really weird things going on about that. All right, real quick, Falcons, Bengals. Who's going to win this, Leo? I'll start with you.
I'm going to go with the Bengals because you want to talk about the best unit on the field. That's the Bengals defense,
Yeah.
and I feel like they're going to neutralize the Atlanta best unit on the field. And then the Bengals offense is pretty good, and I feel like they've got the tools to break down the Falcons.
I really loved what Hugh Jackson did last weekend. I completely agree. Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, they're going to Cincinnati. Yeah, so I see Cincinnati winning that game. The Falcons played well this particular week, but then also there's also a possibility it could be a little too high, or you know what I mean, a little too happy about winning that game because that's a huge win for them. So I think Cincy has got the talent both on offense and defense, and they're definitely a solid enough team to beat Atlanta with especially at home.
Pretty impressive. Brad, what about you?
I'd love to be the contrarian and say Falcons, but I'm not going to. Bengals they look like they're all around a better team. It's a home game for them. I don't believe in Atlanta's defense at all. And then if Matthews does miss any time, good luck blocking all those guys.
All right.
Matthews.
Yes.
So,
Has he? Okay.
Yeah.
Probably win big, and also Atlanta's got to deal with the playing on grass as opposed to those 9 or 10 games they play a season on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
Final game. Final game, Greg. I'm going to let you start with this one. The Saints play the Browns. Can the Browns? Will we see Johnny Clipboard on the field? Give us your prediction.
I have no idea if we're going to see. I don't know. I have no idea if we're going to see Johnny footballing or not at all in that game. I would imagine the Saints prepare a little bit for it just in case he does come out there. For the most part, if you got to think about it, over the last 5 games, Cleveland has had Saints numbers, have beaten the Saints, 4 of the last 5 times they played them.
Oh,
So
wow.
I can't
Okay.
in no way take this game light. But I do think Saints win this game. I think a lot of it comes down to because they're going to be a lot more conscious. They know they made a lot of mistakes that they should have won that game against Atlanta, and so they need to really come in. They know they need to come in and play, so they should be on their P's and Q's here and play well. Number 2, you basically with the Cleveland defense, you got Joe Hayden, who's only can stop one receiver. He can't stop any else. He can't stop Brandon Cooks and now everybody else by himself. So he can, and Jimmy Graham alone is going to be a matchup nightmare.
Right.
So
Right.
there's going to be, it's going to be a big. There's going to be a lot of weapons for Drew Brees to beat that defense. Not discount anything with the talent that Cleveland has. I just think New Orleans in this game, they kind of caught them in the wrong week. If New Orleans wins last week, maybe Cleveland sneaks up on them, but I don't think so after coming off this stinging loss like this.
All right, Brad, what do you think?
I don't see any way the Browns win this game, honestly. It looks like the Saints have a massive advantage. Their offense is way better, and the Browns' defense seemed like one of those trendy top unit kind of picks, but they looked awful last week.
They did look. I completely agree. That was one of the more shocking things to me, how badly they looked.
So if they play like that against the Saints, you're looking at a 50-pointer, and not. Who's going to score for Cleveland? Name one guy who's getting in the end zone. I can't name any. You might be looking at a field goals only offensive performance.
Yeah.
So
A lot of people were rushing out to pick up Terrence West, and so maybe he'll be the difference. Leo, the Cleveland Browns defense they were definitely a dud. Do you think that they are? Did they play down to their capabilities, or are they that bad?
I think you have to consider that they're just that bad. You do have some names on there that you like, but ultimately, they're already having troubles with who the other corner is.
Mm-hmm.
You got a guy in Dante Whitner who was always kind of a little overrated and played well in the San Francisco system, but
because he had a good front, right?
Absolutely, that always helps. And Kruger and
And I
Mingo.
like Tonti Whitner. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I like the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, if Kruger and Mingo can't consistently get to the quarterback, and if Robertson and Dansby aren't doing their jobs, like that linebacking core, the names are all there, and you like the names, but like it's got to all come together in a 3-4. Like that's crucial to get that outside pressure and to get those inside guys doing their jobs. And I don't know if they're going to do that. And then on offense, if Jordan Cameron doesn't play, there's no way they win because they just can't score. I agree completely that there's just nobody. Jordan Cameron will present matchup issues no matter who he's playing. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, I don't see this defense isn't good enough to do anything to the Saints, and I do feel like they're not going to be able to kick it up a notch, even if they were playing down. I don't feel like you can kick it up a notch enough to shut down Drew Brees or anything like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's a pretty strong advantage to the New Orleans Saints, so I expect them to win that game. It's going to be curious to see if the Saints defense does rebound, if they do really get some pressure on Brian Hoyer and how well he plays, and if in fact there is a domino effect, and if we might see the young gunslinger who's currently waiting in the wings. So we will find out. All right, well, the hour always goes by so fast. I want to thank all of my guests tonight for joining me talking AFC South and NFC South. Brad, I will start with you, let you tell everybody where they can find you.
I'm pretty much on Twitter right now. You can find me at Jaguars blog for Jaguars-related stuff and California Jag for everything else.
All right, Greg?
At AttentionDB on Twitter. You can find me there, and I'm there all the time. Looking forward to hearing from
Greg talks
everyone.
more than just Saints. He knows about all of the teams, so give him a follow, and you can talk to him about anything. Leo?
You can find me on Twitter at LeoHowell8, and you can find my writing at BucksNation, at NumberFire, and at RotoGrinders.
I need to check out I have not had a chance to check out your Roto Grinder stuff, but Leo does fantastic work, and if you have not seen his work at NumberFire, you definitely need to check it out. It's great stuff. So thanks for joining me to my guests, and thanks for joining me to my viewers. And I am Sharona. You can find me on Twitter at Sports by Sharona, and you can find me at National Grid. I cannot get used to our new name. NGSC Sports, www.ngscsports.com. Be sure to check out my my Cowboys at Titans preview, and I'll be posting some AFC South content up later on today. And you can also find me Monday through Friday, 10 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time, 7:30 Yahoo Sports on Game Over with Vashti and Sharona. I thank you for joining me, and have a very pleasant Friday evening. I will see you next week.